Hi, and welcome to the Kelly Kitley podcast, America's Social Worker Unfiltered, where we have hopeful, honest, and deeply human conversations. Today, I have Beth Leipholtz, who is an inclusion advocate, the author of The ABCs of Inclusion. She's a social media sensation, and you may know her from seeing car chats with her son Cooper, which are just so beautiful and inspirational. And I'm so glad that you said yes to being on the podcast today.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked me, and thank you for having me and saying all those kind things.
Absolutely. And before we started recording, I was saying this is just so serendipitous because I saw you and Coop on the Kelly Clarkson Show as you were promoting your book and talking about deaf awareness. And I have seen you all over social media, and it just like warms my heart, the stories that you tell and the interactions with your son, who just turned 6 yesterday.
Yes, I
Crazy,
know. It's
started
crazy.
kindergarten. Um, but then when I reached out to you, you're like, yeah, we have crossed over in the sober community. And how, again, serendipitous that it's National Recovery Month
And National Deaf Awareness Month.
and National Deaf Awareness Month, September, double duty. Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
all the September
All
things.
you're a girl after my own heart as somebody who got sober at the age of 20. Can we start there?
Yeah, yeah, I know. I used to talk about it so often, and now these days it's like it's just such a part of my life. But um, I was your typical like good student through high school, super type A, academically focused, and have always struggled, with depression and anxiety. But throughout high school, I really never dabbled in the world of drinking. Going into college, I wasn't like against it. I knew I would. But I actually, this is something that surprises people. I played rugby in college. So for the first 2 years or so is when I was drinking, and I continued playing after I got sober. But for those that don't know, rugby is a very like it is a very drinking oriented sport. Like it's just ingrained in the culture. So I basically went from like 0 to 100 in terms of drinking. And once I started, I just realized, it like tapered my anxiety, and it just progressively got worse as the months went on. So really, I only drank for like 2 years of my life, and I was never even legal drinking age.
But you went hard.
I went hard. Yeah. Yeah.
Hard and
The
fast.
breaking point was the end of sophomore year, like the day before I was supposed to go home for the summer. I ended up in the hospital with a 0.34 BAC, basically just like slept it off because that was sadly like pretty normal for me. Whereas now I think that would probably kill me if I were to just like
Mhm.
go to that level. Um, and it wasn't really a breaking point for me, as we all know. Sometimes it comes for other people first. So it's kind of an ultimatum from my parents in terms of like, you can go to outpatient treatment or you can find somewhere else to live this summer, and you're not going to study abroad in the fall. And there were all of these things at play. So I was like, okay, I'll do it. Not planning to stick with it. But as I do with things, I kind of realized like, oh, this is great, and jumped into it head first because I felt really good physically and started connecting with people, and it just kind of grew from there. So yeah, I haven't had a drink since May 7th of 2013.
Oh my gosh. And how was it different I have so much respect and admiration for young people who get sober because I think in such a normalized drinking culture, especially in college, especially in sports. And, we just came from visiting my son at the University of South Carolina and, being at a football game and there's just
Hmm.
alcohol everywhere. And, I know we both got sober in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and have found different forms as we have continued to be sober, all these years later. But there aren't a lot of 20-year-olds in the rooms
No.
in Alcoholics Anonymous, so finding community to connect with.
Yeah, and for me it was so I actually went to Hazelden, and I went to their specific like youth oriented campus. So I'm lucky I'm in Minnesota. I lived like 45 minutes from there, so I was able to drive back and forth for outpatient. So that was the only like program I ever did, but it was all young people, and not necessarily, people who had alcohol as their main issue. And I clung to that in the beginning. I was like, well, theirs is drugs, theirs is, whatever, and like mine's just alcohol, and tried to like, get my way out of it that way, or like make myself feel better. But that definitely helped to like be able to connect with those peers and eventually realize like, okay, we're struggling with different things, but the root of it is really like the same to a degree. And I was very lucky when I went back to school. I actually did end up studying abroad that fall as I was supposed to. So I left for Chile when I was like 3 months sober, 4 months.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and I spent 5 months there. It was actually great. It could have been really bad, it could have been really good. And it was really good because it got me kind of away from that rugby culture for a while. I had, like 7 months under my belt by the time I came back. People knew I was serious about it. Um, and yeah, the people that I was with, honestly, like my friends and the people with study abroad were happy that I was sober because they didn't have to take care of me. So it was like everybody was supportive in that sense.
Sure.
So I mean, and I know that's not everybody's journey by far for getting sober at a young age, but for me, I think I was just so open about it that it made it easier to not have to explain over and over.
Yeah, and that's amazing. And you were blogging and writing about your experience and your journey in sobriety as a young person, and wrote articles. And
Mhm.
I think your story was featured in Cosmo, maybe.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, so that's a resource for young people and listeners and parents who have children who are going through
Yes.
that journey.
And my whole website from that like era, I don't want to say era because obviously that's still part of my life. I don't write about it nearly as often, but that's all still active and like very, very documented. And that's lifetobecontinued.com.
Love that. Love that. And okay, so there's that platform. Then you get married. How did you meet your husband?
Tinder.
Yay! Yay!
Yeah, so he was
Yay!
living where we live now, and I was
Okay.
about an hour away at college, my senior year. So we just kind of met on there, got coffee. He tried to break up with me after that briefly, and somehow came back, and here we are. So yeah, we got engaged in it was January of 2019. So we were actually visiting another sober friend, Kelly, in Florida when we got engaged. So she's the one who like took our pictures and stuff. And then
Oh,
we flew back to Minneapolis, and 36 hours later, so like landed in Minneapolis, went to the gas station, took a pregnancy test because I just didn't feel right, and it was positive. So we were engaged for 36 hours before realizing that we were having a baby that we had not planned on.
oh
Um,
my
it was a
gosh.
lot. Yeah, I went out to the car and like threw the test at my husband and like I was like, I just want my mom, and we were already going to my parents anyway to like show them the rings. So I like showed her one hand and then I like threw the pregnancy test at the other hand. And like
Oh my
if there's any moment in my life I wish I like in retrospect had recorded, it is that moment because I'm like the
God.
range of emotions on her face, like yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So we
Wow.
always say like he was
Wow.
a surprise from the beginning and like really
Uh-huh.
kept the surprises coming.
Oh my gosh. And this little angel, like we can just talk for hours about him. I mean, he radiates joy and he's hilarious. And okay, take us to you. So did you get married while you were pregnant?
So yeah, and I always say like it kind of ended up being a blessing in disguise. So we got married not like because I was pregnant by any means, but we were like,
Yeah.
it just makes sense like insurance wise and whatever. Let's just do it. So we got married in May of 2019, and I think if we hadn't done that, we probably would have been planning a May 2020 wedding,
Sure.
which obviously we all know what happened in 2020.
Mhm.
Um, so I was about halfway through my pregnancy when we got married, and then I was induced when I was like 37 and a half weeks. I'd had a couple like just tiny hiccups throughout pregnancy, like my placenta aged too quickly, which is something that can actually happen. So they were like monitoring me a couple times a week, and then
Okay.
my blood pressure spiked at the end, which is why they ended up inducing. And then, Cooper was born. Yesterday was his sixth birthday, so September 7th of 2019. Initially, didn't have any like indication that we needed to be concerned about his hearing. Didn't have that necessarily like in our families. My husband's aunt and cousins and her kids are actually all deaf, but they don't have Waardenburg syndrome, which is what we eventually found out that Cooper has. So it's kind of a weird
Oh,
like, could it be
wow.
connected? I don't know. It wasn't on our radar though. And then when we got released from the hospital and they said, oh, he didn't pass his newborn hearing screening. It's not totally like abnormal. He probably has fluid in his ears. Just come back. And so at that point, we were kind of like, they downplayed it because the majority of the time, that's probably the case. Like people come back and their kids pass it and it's fine. So just kind of paid attention to that the first few weeks. I mean, we have three big dogs. We had a lot of people around and he never really like startled or anything.
Mhm.
Um, And then when he was born, he was actually born with a bunch of white hair in the front and all dark hair. And you can still see that in pictures. He still has his white forelock.
Yeah.
And I had posted in like a mom group I was in, just wondering like, hey, does anybody else have this like goofy kind of birthmark or anybody's kids? And somebody commented, and I'm still in touch with her, and she said like, oh, I've seen that that can be an indicator of Waardenburg syndrome. So that's when I started Googling, and I had no idea that that had any connection to hearing. Like I was like, oh, I've never heard of this.
Hmm.
Started reading, and I was like, it was like a checklist of like Cooper's like physical characteristics, like the wider set eyes and the white forelock. And then I got to the part about hearing loss, and I was just like my world just kind of stopped. Like I knew in that moment, I was
Hmm.
like, this is what we're dealing with. Like I knew he was deaf. You know, that didn't make it any easier to get the official diagnosis,
Yeah.
but it definitely like gave us a lot of ground to stand on in terms of advocating for a quicker diagnosis and like evidence of like this is what we're dealing with.
Wow. So you found that out doing your own research and
Yeah. Well,
asking
thanks to that one
questions.
woman, but yeah.
Yeah. Sure. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and luckily I had a friend here in town. Actually, my they own the company I work for still, but their
Mm,
daughter was born with Down syndrome, so they had you know a family practitioner here that who they had amazing luck with as far as advocating and you know really listening. So
okay.
referred us to him, and he put in our referral immediately at Children's in Minneapolis.
Okay. And you said, when you first heard that, the words that he's deaf, that it was a sad
It was
moment.
it was a lot. It was a lot of things. I think so. He was 6 weeks old. It was October 18th of 2019 when we like officially got his diagnosis. At that point, we had taken him back to the hospital where he was born and done like one more of the newborn screenings. But all they can tell you on that is like pass or fail. And fail, I should say, is a very hot button
Mm,
word in the deaf community. Like it's not really considered failing, but that's how like medically they put it.
okay.
So I still, you know, even though I'd come across Wardenberg at that point and everything, like I think I still had a little bit of hope, like, oh, maybe he has progressive hearing loss, or maybe he has like partial,
Mhm.
you know, to that degree. And so in retrospect, I know now that it was actually a lot better that he just was profoundly deaf because it gave us clear moves forward instead of just waiting.
Mhm.
But yeah, so his it's called an auditory brainstem response is the actual test they do. It's like 2 hours long. So you really have to like, I mean, when they're that little, they encourage you to just keep them hungry and tired, and then hopefully they just fall asleep and eat. And
Okay.
that luckily is what happened. So he didn't have to be sedated. Um, Basically just held him that whole time. And you can tell that they're like seeing results and stuff on the screen. So it's just kind of like a hard thing to sit through.
Sure.
But yeah, they came back in and they were like, you know, I'm sorry, we didn't see any response at all, like to any frequencies, any levels. Like basically a jet plane could have taken off next to him and he wouldn't have heard it.
Mm. Mhm.
Um, and I think the hardest thing in that moment was just like, okay, we have to get our crap together enough to like stand up and walk out of here and
Mhm.
get to the car before
Mhm.
falling apart. Like,
Sure.
um, and so it was just kind of more of like a numb daze, I think. And then kind of the sadness really hit when went to my parents again because they live closer to the Twin Cities.
Mhm.
And I just like I sat on the same couch where I sobbed about my pregnancy test, sobbing about, you know, the next thing we were facing. And like
Mhm.
that's not lost on me now that like my mom knew and she said later, she's like, I just let you cry, but like I knew the same way you know, you got sober, you faced this pregnancy, like you're gonna jump in and you're gonna advocate and you're gonna figure out everything you can and it's gonna be okay. But it was yeah, I still tear up thinking about it because I'm just like it was a lot of it was a lot of things, a lot of stages of grief for sure. Apart from denial, I don't think I ever was really in denial. But
Mm.
yeah.
Making me tear up too. And you say, I mean, the way that you have embraced this and used this to advocate for other people. I mean, I was looking at your website and how to have IEP conversations and, tons of resources. And so I would imagine that helps you greatly as
Mhm.
well as it helps other people. And so you went from this platform of talking about your sobriety journey and helping other people in your healing process to now another journey as a mom who's navigating. I mean, Coop has cochlear implants
Yeah,
and he signs. And when you say
sometimes.
bilingual, sometimes when
He
you
has an interpreter at school, so like he very much takes in sign receptively as like an additional tool, but he
Okay.
prefers to speak.
Well, and I'd imagine there's subcultures within the deaf community too,
Hmm.
because I had an author on the podcast, Jen Pasteloff, who is deaf but reads lips,
Yep.
and doesn't sign. And are there opinions about cochlear implants too? I mean,
Yeah, yeah. And I would say like early on that definitely caught me more so off guard. I will say like my husband's cousin who I mentioned, being deaf, she's around our age and she primarily signs. Like they don't really rely on hearing devices. So I
okay,
was able to have conversations with her early on that kind of prepped me a little bit in terms of that. Like, if you're going to share publicly, like you're probably going to run into these opinions. And I
sure.
think, I never like to sound like I'm speaking for the deaf community because I'm not. But from what I've gathered, it's more so when parents kind of present it as like a fix to being deaf or like a solution
Mm,
instead of like a tool. And so for us, his cochlear implants are very much a tool. I mean, there's times he does not want to wear them. There's times we've been 2 hours from home and they both stopped working. The batteries die. Like at the end of the day, they're technology and they're tools. And I knew that I wanted a way to still communicate with him, obviously, before he would be able to, now he's just reading everything. So half the time he's like, type it on your phone. But like I knew that there would be bath time routines and traveling and times that sign would be incredibly helpful. And then as well as in school when he's facing like listening fatigue and just having a harder time like weeding out, background noise because that can be one of the harder parts with cochlear implants. So he has a remote system that the teacher wears, and then he also has an interpreter, which is amazing. I mean, he's only in kindergarten, and we're in Minnesota, which is one of the best like 0 to 3 early intervention states for sure. And then same just across the board for education. So we're very lucky. We live pretty rurally, and that was one of my biggest concerns. But the district has been amazing.
and how does he like kindergarten?
So far, he likes it. Every day I ask him like a high and a low, and he keeps telling me his whole day's a high. So
And he wears glasses too, because I
yeah,
saw something that you posted that you were holding his um I what's the language that you use
I
when you
think I said senses, two of his five senses, or
he didn't have
yeah,
his eyes or his ears as he was like
yeah.
swimming in the lake.
Yep, he's
Um
super farsighted, which is not really part of Wardenburg. Like he's just
yeah,
farsighted,
yeah.
but yeah.
And so you wrote this book that was published in 2023,
Yes.
and it's releasing with updates at the end of the month, September
Yep.
30th, right?
Yep.
And tell me about that book. It became a #1 Amazon bestseller for new releases for children's books. Is
Yes.
that
Yep.
correct?
So, and the difference between the two editions. So the first time I published it through an independent publisher, meaning like I
Hmm.
did, all of the work on the front end, all of the financial backing, like everything was essentially on me. And
Yeah.
they were just a really good resource along the way. They were the ones who helped me like connect with an illustrator from their database, like basically sort of a hand holder and like there when I need them type of resource. And they're amazing. That was Wise Inc. Media out of the Twin Cities.
Okay.
I never, going into it, I already had a social media presence, not necessarily to the extent that we do now. Um, didn't, and I guess I should preface it by saying like the book itself. So the premise is it's an ABC's book for kids, but every letter in the book correlates to a real child and their name. So like C is for Cooper, and it talks about being deaf. So they're all like different diagnoses, and they're people that we either like knew or crossed paths with, via social media or connected with, as I was trying to like kind of find those last fits for the letters.
Hmm.
And so the first edition just ended up doing so well. I mean, we did a Kickstarter where the goal was to raise like $10,000 basically to print the first round of books. So I had been doing some marketing and videos, and we ended up surpassing like $65,000 on that, and like 2,000 pre-orders,
Oh my
which
gosh.
was mind-blowing and overwhelming because then you're like responsible for shipping those at that point. And
Hmm.
um, it just from there, I mean, it just kept selling, and as far as classrooms and libraries and in stores, and just did so well that it was getting hard to keep up like financially because I mean it's not cheap to like print a couple thousand books at a time and then not knowing if there was like going to continue to be that return and
Yes.
having to make those decisions. And so eventually I had another author friend from the same place who had connected and had an agent, and I had been kind of exploring that avenue in terms of a more traditional route. And so the stars all just kind of aligned, and she had switched recently to a place where she was looking for more children's books. We just kind of clicked, and then she pitched or queried a few, more traditional publishing houses, and it ended up getting picked up by Hachette, which is one of the big five. So that was crazy. It all just moved so fast.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, and Little Brown Young Readers is their like children's print imprint, children's books. So that is where it's re-releasing on September 30th.
And with that, you can reach even a larger audience. I mean, I'm a
Yeah.
self-published author as well. So when you have that backing, you just have a bigger reach.
Yes.
And so that is absolutely amazing. And I'm so curious, were you just born into the world like this?
There's things I'm not good at.
But I mean,
Um,
just your like you exude passion and you have turned situations that you have adversities into some really beautiful experiences
yeah,
for
I
people
don't
to
know.
have
I'm an
hope.
Enneagram 4. That can tell you a lot.
Oh, I love
No, I've always been that way. Like I've always just been kind
it.
of, I don't want to say emotional because that always has like a negative connotation, I guess, but like in tune, vulnerable, like in tune with my emotions.
Mhm,
Probably a little bit of an overshare to an extent, but that serves me well now.
mhm,
Um, and yeah, I always, when people say that, I'm like, all of these things I started out sharing because it helped me process, like I didn't go into sharing about my sobriety anticipating that it was going to eventually help other people or connect me with all these people.
mhm,
Um, and it came full circle in both scenarios. I love today when I get a message from like a mom with a newborn who's facing the same thing and I can like talk to them and, not only that, but like I think more than just talking to them being able to like literally see Cooper's day to day, because that was like a lifeline for me in the beginning, was to like connect with other families who were sharing similar journeys and be like, okay, this is what their life looks like. And yeah, it's going to be like not a straightforward trajectory necessarily to get there. And that was especially true for us because Coop had his surgery in June of 2020. So like right in the midst of COVID. And then we were basically like in our little family bubble for that first year. So we really weren't exposed to many other like kids. And
mhm,
so I think when we kind of came out of that, it was like, oh, like people who had kids around the same time, they were talking. And like that was really, really jarring because it was like we were just very much in Coop's trajectory and like we didn't have another child before to compare it to.
sure.
Or um, so that's what I always say to people. Like it's just not like a linear process. Like you
Mhm,
think you've kind of hit certain points and you're in the clear and then like something else happens. And that's even still true today. We'll continue to face different scenarios. I think
mhm,
sometimes people, see our videos now and they're like, wow, they're on the other side of it, or, but there's things that are always going to come up.
mhm. Absolutely. And you do share the hard things. You
Yeah, and I do want to touch on that balance because there's no like rule book for the social media and the sharing and being a parent of, sharing your child, I never anticipated this, following of people. I never went into it with this plan. And so that's a hard balance too as he gets older. And I mean, I think I made the decision, like 1 or 2 years ago to stop sharing like his hard moments necessarily, not meaning I won't talk about them, but like, you don't really see them anymore because that was a mindful thing that I've done. Um, and I think,
Meaning, and just for clarification, meaning like if he's having a meltdown or
yeah,
feeling overwhelmed, you're not putting him on video
right,
and sharing that. But
right.
you talk about your experience
Yes, yeah.
with
So I try to frame it more from like, my side or like the learning experience of it type of thing.
him.
But I think that's also a double-edged sword because then, people often say like, "Oh, he's such a joy, he's such an angel, like he's always so happy." And I'm like, he's really not, but like, and it's hard as he gets older. We have conversations now. I mean, he knows what the card chats are. He watches like YouTube kids stuff. So he watches kind of like other family
Yeah.
vlogs
Yeah.
sometimes. So I think that's a good like comparison for him. And I'm
Mhm.
really glad that we started that conversation because like I mean, he's come home from school a few days and said that people like other kids recognize him from his car chats, like the older kids.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So and that's happening more and more too. Like when we're out places, is getting like stopped a
Sure.
lot. And so like I'm glad that he knows versus like
Hmm.
waiting until he's older to talk about it type of
Sure.
thing.
Sure.
But there's no like, yeah, there's no clear-cut rule book for
Right.
raising a child who's been on social media.
Sure. And you're creating a model. I'm curious to know who your role model is. Like who have you looked to for guidance and inspiration and motivation?
Yeah. In terms of like the social media side of things or just
Just
as a
in
whole?
life,
Yeah.
whether it was the sobriety journey or, raising a child with disabilities or
Yeah. It's a hard question because I think it kind of like ebbs and flows, as time changes. Like there's people
sure.
that I really leaned on in the beginning of this journey that maybe I don't necessarily talk to as much
Hmm.
now, just
Hmm.
because like I'm kind of being that person for somebody else.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, somebody, as far as like, social media goes in that journey, somebody I do enjoy talking to is Bailey, Franklin's mom. Do you know of
I
her?
don't know. Mm-mm.
Bailey Daw, I can't ever say her full last name,
Okay.
but they have a couple million followers on TikTok, and she's kind of gone through that same trajectory of like, she went for a while, decided just to like not share her kids at all, but then Franklin also has a diagnosis that like they didn't know anything about until coming across it elsewhere, and so she shares about that and has kind of shifted to like some of her own content, but also still the kids, and like so I just appreciate watching other people kind of being in that same position and like showing that they can still be successful.
Yes.
And like, I think it's easy to feel like, oh, people watch my content because of Cooper. And then that makes me feel like it like stresses myself out, even though I know that it's not, it's the dynamic, like it's the
Mhm.
everything between us. So it's just daunting sometimes, I think, to think about like, oh, I could shift to just doing my own thing. But at the same time, I'm like, I love that he brings people so much happiness and like
Yeah.
people are having, a hard day and they watch that, but also
Hmm.
parents raising children in a similar position. Like it shows them how to have those conversations and like on the flip side when they start advocating for themselves. And so it's always a push and pull for me of like, do I want to continue sharing? How much do I want to share?
Of course, of course. And as he gets older too, and might have an opinion about that.
Yeah.
And, I see your husband sometimes when you post. What industry is he in?
So he currently works for the county, doing like the parks maintenance and all the outdoor stuff. So
Oh,
he
okay.
shifted to that this year. But
Okay.
construction and
Okay.
carpentry is his background.
And
And he's
did
just not as much of a like he'll be in stuff if I ask him to, or like, in pictures and stuff, but he's not super comfortable on camera like I am, I guess.
Well, and that has to be a balance too, right? I mean, this
Mhm.
isn't a path that, I mean, maybe more so your generation because you just turned 33, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Um, and I'm 47, so the difference in terms of accessibility and experience, more of your generation knows how to use those tools that it
Yes.
might be more common language, as opposed to somebody my age and being like, what? You're like an influencer or, what is the language you say when somebody asks
I
you?
usually say content creator.
Content creator. Love that.
Because I feel like that's more accurate.
Mhm.
I don't know. Like, yes, I do partnerships and with brands, but I always am very careful about like, does this actually align? Is it something I'm actually going to use? If I am using it, do I actually like it? That's always a hard thing to navigate too. Like, I
Yeah.
want time to try something before I go and, you know, talk about it. Um, but yeah, I think content creation is really just more about storytelling to me, and that's what I feel like I try to do when I create videos.
Mhm.
I don't necessarily get on there like hoping to influence people. It's definitely, one of my income streams for sure,
Oh
but it's not something that I have ever desired to do full time.
my gosh. And what was your degree in college?
Communication.
Oh, okay.
So I feel like everything, I'm also a photographer. I always say that's like a 6 month a year gig in Minnesota because I mean, same as Chicago. It's just,
Mhm.
it's cold and miserable and
Yeah.
I don't do studio work. So it's
Mhm.
like, a rush from May to October and then it's
Mhm.
quiet. And then I still work for a small agency in the town that I live in doing web design. So we're all kind of spread out, sort of just trusted to get our stuff done, which is awesome.
Oh my gosh. So
But it
you
all
do have
overlaps.
many jobs.
I know, I know. In the book and yeah.
Oh my gosh. So does Cooper ever ask about siblings or do you envision having any more children?
He loves babies. We
I love the way
went
you
we
said
went a
that.
couple of places like we went to our county fair a few times. That's what it was. And there were so many babies like in strollers. And every time he would see a stroller, he would just beeline away from me and just stand in front of it and stare at the baby. And like, I'm still making my way through people and he's just sitting there staring at a baby. And so we had to have a few conversations like you can't just touch random babies. Like Tell them that you just like babies. So yeah, I mean, I think he thinks he wants one. I don't know how crazy about it he would be
Mhm.
if that were to happen. And we're not closed off to it by any means. I think I just kind of always feel like, okay, Cooper will get he'll get easier. It'll get
Mhm.
better. And
Mhm.
he's a high strung kid. Like he
Mhm.
really is. And my mom raised five of us. She stayed home with us. And like when she has him and is watching him, she's like, he is five of you. And I'm like, I know. Like,
Oh my gosh. I didn't realize you're one of five. I am
yeah.
too. What
Oh,
number are you?
funny. First.
Of course. Of course, birth order. We should talk about that. You're the oldest of five. And so
Yes.
how old is the youngest sibling?
She just turned 21. So
Okay.
yeah, she and I are probably the closest. A lot of the traveling I do is with her and my mom.
Oh, wow.
But I mean, I'm close with all of my
Yeah.
siblings. I see her the most probably.
Okay. So, last question, because we hear about this so much in recovery, and something that I'm really interested in is self-care and spirituality. Those are like two questions I always ask people about. And um, I'm assuming you don't play rugby anymore, but I see
No.
you do CrossFit.
Yes. Yes. CrossFit is a big mental self-care for me. I think that's also been a journey in itself because, 4 years ago, the way I did CrossFit was very different. Not 4 years ago, but right before Coop was born, like I would get frustrated if I didn't hit certain amounts that I could hit before, or like everything had to be so intense. And I think as I've gotten older, and I'm currently facing like a diagnosis for hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome,
Oh,
which so I have a referral in at the Mayo. But that experience and like learning about that has changed a lot about the way that I like view my body and its capabilities and realizing like I need to I need to balance, the crazy strength lifting wads with taking care of myself. And that's if you don't know what that is, it's basically rooted in connective tissue. So I've dealt with like insane bruising, terrible circulation in my lower legs my whole life. A lot of hypermobility, which has led to a lot of like joint injuries. And it's just been, yeah, it's eye-opening in that way. So I think
mhm.
that's something I'm always evolving into is like how do I keep my physical fitness at the forefront? I got a
Sure.
Peloton last year, which I think is awesome because it's, a little bit less impact. So I
Yeah,
trade off
yeah.
with that.
Hmm.
Um,
That's a good old lady workout, as I like to
yeah,
call
I
it. I
love
have one in
it.
my
No,
basement.
it's
There's
good.
nothing like getting on the bike.
Yeah. My mom's a big biker, so she's trying to get me into like road biking. But no, I love CrossFit for the community and the intensity, and I think I always will.
Okay.
And then as far as yeah, spirituality, I always like, we're not big church people, we're not religious. I always say like I feel the most connected to any kind of whatever being that is when I'm outside. I mean, we live in the country, we get to spend a lot of time out during the fall and summer. But that's what always makes me feel like, okay, I can breathe again and like I am not the center of the universe and things will unfold how they'll unfold. And so that's kind of where I go when I need that disconnect or connection, I guess. Disconnect from reality, but connection to something.
Sure. Oh my gosh, Beth, you are such a gift.
Thank you.
And, I think you are wise beyond your years, and what you put out into the world, I hope comes back to you
Thank
tenfold.
you.
Um, and for people listening, I will put the link into your websites, and to purchase the release of the book on September 30th. The
Yes.
ABC
Available for pre-order now. So
pre-order now. Yes, I know those are so important. So we'll
yes.
get that out soon. Thank
Awesome.
you so much for being here, and thank you for listening.
Thank you.